all of you for today's webinar on battery waste compliances and EPR, Navigating the Battery Waste Management Rule 2022. It is our immense pleasure to introduce Dr. Venkatesh Sir, legal expert EHS compliances at Aprajita, who brings over 23 years of global experience across law, academia, and industry. So, in today's session, Sir will provide us practical insights into battery waste management rule 2022, covering the regulatory framework, extended procedure responsibility, CPCB registration reporting, battery collection, recycling targets, stakeholder responsibilities, compliances risk, penalties, and industries with the best practice. This session will highlight certain steps an organization needs to take to strengthen the compliance and build an active battery waste management roadmap. Before we begin, I request everyone to post your questions in the Q&A section. We will be addressing all the questions at the end of the session. With that, I will invite Dr. Venkatesh sir to start with the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Shreya. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for logging in. Let me share my screen. So hope it is visible.
Yeah, it's visible, sir.
Okay. So thanks again for joining in and for this episode of Environmental Safety Laws webinar series. This is going to be on the battery waste compliance as mandated by Battery Waste Management Rules 2022. Okay. So this is the outline of my presentation. I will start with the overview of the regulatory framework. Probably if you attended the previous webinars on e-waste or solid waste, you will see kind of reinforcement and repetition of the same. Okay. Then followed by the applicability, because first thing we always ask is whether it is applicable. So that's why we always cover the applicability part first. Okay. Followed by few slides on key definitions. Actually, the rules, it has about 30 terms defined. I know the interpretation clause, what we call it, they are defined. But out of that, a few handful of terms we will go through in this webinar. Next, we will see the compliance framework and salient features of these rules. Okay, followed by a slide or two on the environmental compensation, which is generally it is the courts, which impose compensation, but as an exception to the rule, the e-waste as well as the battery waste management rules expressly provides for levy of environmental compensation by the authority. Okay, so we will have discussed that, followed by some statistics on the recyclers. They play a major role. So we will see the recyclers, some statistics, how many are there across different states. Finally, we'll share the e-resources, which are very useful for, in terms of the compliance under the battery waste management rules. Okay. Okay. So with that, we'll go to the regulatory framework. So this is a rule, battery waste management rule. So this rule it's a subordinate legislature, we call it, or a delegated legislature, other terms we use, is actually emanated from or framed under the Environmental Protection Act, which is the principal governing legislature act for matter pertaining to environment. So this act, Environment Protection Act 1986, it's a unique, it has a unique regulatory framework. Generally, when we look at the acts, it will give the obligations, duty, liability, everything for the different scenarios for the subject under consideration or the object of the act. But if you look at this Environmental Protection Act, it's a very short act, and 15 or so sections, I believe. It does not prescribe much direct compliance obligation, except two, okay, which is also generic for handling hazardous waste and standards and procedures to be followed, things like that. Only those. However, what the Act has beautifully done is it has delegated the powers to the authority to frame rules for different subject matters. Those are the ones which are shown here, starting from e-waste to plastic waste to biomedical waste to battery waste, which is the subject of today's webinar. So if you look at this framework, so each subject matter, be it e-waste or construction demolition waste or solid waste or battery waste in this case, is dealt separately by the rules framed under this. So that is the regulatory framework in which we are operating as far as this is concerned. So if you look at this framework, it is for the most part, it's an exclusive framework. By exclusive, what I mean is something which is covered under plastic waste is not covered under e-waste, and something which is called a biomedical waste is not covered under solid waste, so on and so forth. So for the most part, different wastes are dealt exclusively for the most part. But battery waste is kind of an exception to this exclusive framework. So it is closely and in glove with the hazardous waste and other waste rules. Okay, so there are various touch points with hazardous waste management. In fact, the hazardous waste term itself is found more than a dozen times in this battery waste management rules. Okay, so this rule is a recent, if I can use that word, addition, in the sense that the earlier predecessor was a rule framed way back in 2001. It was called Batteries Management and Handling Rules 2000. So that rule was superseded by this current rule, which was framed in 2022, Battery Waste Management Rules. And there are a few amendments, I think four of them, 4 or 5 amendments so far. Okay. So that is how the subject matter is dealt with in this framework. Another important aspect why this battery waste management is unique in the sense, unlike any other waste, maybe solid waste, battery waste management rule, it is the responsibility for all of us, either as an individual or an entity or an organization or anything, because there is a particular obligation expressly provided for the consumers. We are all consumers. Batteries is there, it's ubiquitous, right? Right from our cell phones to watches, laptops, you name it, pretty much it's there everywhere. So we are all consumers, and there are institutional consumers, the entities, and of course, there are other entities like producers, those things. So the consumer of the battery has obligation under this battery waste. Okay, there is an express rule provided, and we will see in the due course. So that's another reason why this battery waste has a particular significance. So with this, next, we will see the applicability. So the rule 2 expressly provides for the applicability. It says, all these words are not mine, or I have not rephrased. I have just, copied the words from that rule 2. Okay. It says it shall apply to producer. The term producer is further defined under Rule 3U. Dealer, consumer. So I just highlighted a while ago that consumer has an obligation too. Okay. Then entities involved in collection, segregation, transportation, refurbishment, and recycling of waste battery. So refurbishment is also defined. What is a waste battery? That is also defined. And the most important thing is the last point. Is applicable to all types of battery regardless of chemistry, shape, volume, weight, material composition, and use. So practically, it is just applicable to each and every devices which has a battery, either as a part of the device or it is a standalone thing. Okay. Like if you take this laptop, it has a battery, so the rule applies to that battery. Or if you take let us take those battery rechargeable packs, which is basically batteries. That's all, which stores energy, and then that energy is used for charging some device. Okay, or our UPS system, it has batteries. It's all applicable. Okay. So that is another reason why this battery waste management rules, I like to call it as an industry agnostic law. So it doesn't matter what industry, what type of process, what materials, what factory, what establishment, doesn't matter. It is agnostic. It's applicable throughout as long as you are dealing with battery, which as we say it's ubiquitous. We can't avoid it. So the rule comes into play. Okay. However, for obvious reasons, there is a couple of exceptions provided under the rule. These rules are not applicable when it comes to the equipments and battery associated with defense, military, or national security or space application. They are excluded from the application of this battery waste management rules 2022. It's an obvious exception. So the bottom line is as long as you're having a battery, these rules comes into picture. As simple as that. Okay. It doesn't matter what the process is, what the industry is, it doesn't matter at all. Even for domestic use, like I said, consumer, it's there. Okay. Now let's discuss some definitions. So I have chosen those definitions which I think is very important to understand from the compliance point of view, and where the significance is very important. Because the reason for emphasizing our definition is, as you guys are aware, if a particular law, say an act or a rule or regulation, defines a term, we have to use that definition to as far as that act or the rule or the law is concerned. We can't use the dictionary or other common definitions. That is the importance of this definition clause or the interpretation clause, that any term which is defined, only that definition we have to take as far as that particular law is concerned. So in this case, battery is defined by this rule. So we have to take this definition of battery, not any other definition. Okay. So this battery definition is pretty expansive definition. It says battery means new or refurbished cell or battery, including accumulator. Accumulator is a British term or gag term, which basically means a large rechargeable battery. That's the term used, accumulator. It's a British English. The one which is highlighted is to understand the definition clearly, which is any source of electrical energy generated by direct conversion of chemical energy, and includes disposable primary or secondary battery. So this definition actually is not part of the original 2022 rule. It was amended a couple of years back So the amendment, what it did was, in the original, even the components of battery was considered battery in the definition. Now they have removed it for obvious reason. I think that makes this definition pretty neat and pretty precise, you know. So the components are excluded per se, because the thrust is on recycling. So the components gets, you know, removed and things like that. Okay. So that's the reason, and they have tightened the definition. So this is again, it's a very, very open-ended, technical, expansive definition. So we need not bother much into the actual application. So for the practical point of view, anything what we generally call and understand and know as battery is battery, according to this definition. Okay, because everything converts pretty much, it's a source of energy, electrical energy, and that come about by direct conversion of chemical energy, whatever batteries, you know, we can think of. Okay. This is the definition of battery. Next is, interestingly, the word used battery is also defined in this rule, the rule ZD. Like I said, it has more than 30 terms defined. The used battery is also defined. So as per this definition, used battery means battery and or its components which have been used and have residual life and suitable for refurbishment. So this is another reason why I mentioned that they have refined the original definition. They have removed the components from the battery definition. So here the used battery, basically it can be the entire battery or the component of it which has some life in it, and it could be refurbished. So that is what the definition of used battery is. Okay. So the waste battery is also defined. Okay, I don't want to jump again. It's also defined. We will see. So for now, we have seen what battery is and what used battery. So used battery means the battery has such are the components which have some residual life and suitable for refurbishment. So what is refurbishment? It's basically extension of life. Now comes the waste battery. It's a pretty, again, expansive definition. It is an inclusive definition because it starts with the word includes, not means. Okay. It's defined under Rule 3 ZE. Waste battery means used and or end of life battery and or its components or spares or parts or consumables which may or may not be hazardous in nature. So I mentioned at the start that the word hazardous is there, right? The touch point. So you see it here. Even though the first definition pretty much is very, very expansive and inclusive, they further specify other cases, situations also. Pre-consumer off-spec battery and its components or spares or parts or consumables. See, even the waste and things during production and the discards from production, that's also considered waste battery. Now comes the interesting part. Battery whose date for appropriate use has expired. So every battery comes with an expiry date. If that has expired, for example, it was in shelf, it was used or not used, doesn't matter. If it has expired, then it is called a waste battery. And finally, to cover any loose ends, they have included this also. Battery which has been discarded by the user. So even the discards are waste battery. See, look at this, it's pretty inclusive definition. So basically, once a battery is sold, in due course, it becomes a waste battery, whether it is discarded or the expiry of its lifetime or its parts is not working, end of life, used, you know, everything. So as long as the battery is in use, then it is not called waste battery. As simple as that. Even if it is in shelf, it is not used. With the passage of time, when the expiry date comes, it becomes a waste battery. Okay. That's where the distinction between the used battery. Used battery is a subset of waste battery. Okay. So practically what it means is to understanding any battery which we are using and which we would become a waste battery. As simple as that. Okay. So again, we talked about the applicability. You see that this waste batteries definition, we see that this is applicable to all of us, both as individuals and all the entities, the institutional entities. Okay. Interesting definition of the word disposal. Everybody understands what a disposal is, right? But the ingenuity of this rule is that they find the rule maker found that this is very important to define this term, so they have included this. Okay. Disposal means any operation which does not lead to reuse, recovery, refurbishing, or recycling, and include physico-chemical and or biological treatment or deposition in secured landfill. So they have excluded all these and they call it disposal. So it says any operation. So it sounds very technical term, but what it means is as long as any act which does not constitute any one of these reusing, recovery, refurbishing, etc., is called disposal. Okay. The reason why this disposal term is used is twofold. Number one is the act is a battery waste management act. Okay. So the management, how do you manage? Disposal is one of the management activity or operation, right? You just dispose it, how to dispose. The rule mandates that it has to be disposed with a sound, environmentally sound management practice. So that's why when we dispose, that action should also be environmental because the batteries are pretty, what do I say, detrimental to the environment because the materials used is of such nature. Okay. For example, if you take lead acid battery, lead it's pretty much a carcinogen, acid, corrosive again. Okay. Next term, extended producer responsibility, EPR in short. It's defined specifically. It means the responsibility of any producer of battery for environmentally sound management of waste battery. So this is the definition. So this definition is more of an in principle conceptual definition. However, these EPR is translated into an actionable item, which is there in the rules. Second, continuing the definition, we see that even the environmentally sound management is also defined. It means management of waste battery in a manner to protect human health and environment against any adverse effects which may result from any substance contained in battery. These may include refurbishment and recycling. See, that's where the entire life cycle, the entire operations is covered under this act. That's why they find it very important to include expressly the last term. These may include refurbishment and recycling. Okay. And what is the purpose? object to protect human health and the environment. Okay. And they have used the word any substance, which makes it quite, all encompassing. That's where we saw earlier that even the components are, are fine definitions in the used battery definitions. Okay, fine mention in the used battery. Okay. And this is a very interesting definition of consumer. We all know who a consumer is, but by defining this, they have given emphasis. Whenever there is a general understanding or the way to look at a law is if any particular thing is expressly mentioned by the lawmakers, it means they are giving very much importance to it. The significance, okay, even though it is well known or it is commonly understood, if they specify those things, it means they are giving importance to it. That's what the word consumer is defined and means end user of battery. Okay. So this is also expressly defined in the act. This is another reason why I highlighted at the start of the webinar that even consumers are covered. Now everybody is covered. Everybody, this rule is applicable. Okay. So with these few definitions, let's see the overall compliance framework. What does the rule talk about? And what are the salient features of this rule? Okay. First is three concepts. Three key concepts which can be seen or the common denominator in the various rules of these battery waste management rules. They are the entire product life cycle compliance, which can be seen directly under the extended producer responsibility. So the extended producer responsibility basically covers or, from this notion of the entire life cycle compliance. Okay. So it's not that the producer is responsible for having a very good product, using environmentally sound processes, and using materials which are environmentally not that adversely impact. No, it doesn't stop there. It says the extended producer responsibility concept, which is about the entire life cycle of the product. That's one key concept. And pretty much it's the same similar concept we see in e-waste management also. Second is polluter pays principle. So this is one of the doctrines or principles evolved through judicial pronouncements in environmental jurisprudence, and this in any environmental law, this is one of the fundamental principles. Polluter pays. As the name says, the person who is polluting should pay for it. Okay. This is seen in action in this rule in terms of the environmental compensation, which we will see next. Okay. So the concept of environmental compensation came from this principle of polluter pays. Okay. And another, enforcement or what do you say, making this law efficient working, they have digitized and they have integrated also. So they have a centralized portal, and the law specifically mandates that things has to be done through this portal, like the registration, the EPR generation, so on and so forth. And they have integrated the different players, the different entities, like the recyclers, producers. Okay. So both these concepts are found mentioned in the rules. So these are the key concepts. This next we will see the compliances. So these compliances, I've split into two. One is general compliance. By general, what I mean is these are usual compliances. You will see it in pretty much any law. Okay. And these are listed operation wise, by operation, I mean how to comply, like registrations, returns. And it has given a lot of emphasis on standards and specifications specs. Okay. And another common thread is everybody has to deal with registered entities or registered establishment. For example, if we are handing over our, waste, we have to deal with registered recyclers or refurbishers, as the case may be. Okay, that's a very key compliance. Okay. In fact, as consumer also individuals, we are supposed to do that. And the onus is more on the producer through the extended producer responsibility. Another thing, interesting thing about this rule is, if you look at the rule, they would have used the word functions of the producer, function of the, recyclers, like that. The word function will be used. So generally, the word responsibility, obligation, those words are used in laws, and the function is usually used in the context of authorities, But here, since this particular subject matter involves everybody has touch points with everybody, I believe they have found it more prudent to use the word function rather than responsibility. So we have to function in a sound, environmentally sound way. Every one of us. It mandates that all of us should play our role. We have to function in a way that we don't adversely impact the environment. Probably that's the reason why they have used the word function. If you read the Bar Act, you will see the word function will be repeated, not obligation, not the liability or duties, not those words, which is the common words which are used in laws, right? When they talk about compliance. Because as we see, any one of the player not performing their function properly will have a detrimental impact as far as this battery, because battery is ubiquitous, right? And the batteries are, some of the materials used in the batteries are pretty uh, nasty for the environment. So that's where a lot of emphasis is given on recycling. So if you look at if you look at the most part of the rules, they would have given prescription for the producers, for the refurbishers, for the recyclers. So, for example, if you take the producers, there are some prohibitions. There is a schedule of items, prohibitions and labeling compliances, right? That's one. And there are some specifications given in terms of certain uh, materials, like cadmium, for example, or lead, for that matter. The, the rule mandates that the composition, the percentage of these materials should be below certain level. It specifically gives. Okay. And most common materials used are all given, and there are couple of amendments also. So those are just chemical and chemistry related uh, things, which is of not general use. So I am not covering that, but it is suffice to say that it provides those standards specifically, expressly, and similarly, for refurbishers or recyclers, it specifies how much you are supposed to take care of the recycling, how much percentage you can recycle and extract all the different materials. Those percentages are given, specifically given. And what are the practices, and what are the standards you have to follow for refurbishing? That's also specified. So that is the main chunk. If you go by the rules, which runs to 20 plus pages, most of it is in these realm. That's why I try to emphasize on this. So that's basically the technical, chemical engineering and chemistry part of it. That's the main, one of the main chunk of this. Okay. So these are all the general usual compliances. And as far as the consumer is concerned, that's where the last point comes. We should also uh, follow sound, environmentally sound management practice. We have to segregate. We meaning I'm using the word we, both as individuals, as corporate entities or institution. We should not mix this battery waste with other waste. It's expressly provided in the rule. Okay. This is a mandatory compliance. And we have to deal with the registered entities when we are disposing of. Okay. And to bridge the gap or to make sure that to close the loop, the EPR plays an important role. The extended producer responsibility does put onus on the responsibility on the producer to collect the batteries, because as individuals, compliances is difficult to monitor, but it's easy to monitor the institutional players. Okay, so the rule provides for the different timelines, which year, how much they are supposed to do, what is the targets, Of course, there are some, it's not a very rigid rule framework, but it has factored in the practical difficulty. So there is a long period, there is a 10-year cycle period, and we could carry forward, and different batteries are dealt differently. This is another key concept, like the batteries used in electrical vehicle, which all of you know that there is a great push towards electric vehicle. Those are dealt separately. Not all batteries are clubbed as one, unlike the other subject matter items here. The rule makers are cognizant of the fact that the different batteries are having different the chemistry or the different properties, and the way they are used and the way they could be recycled are different. So they have categorized and given these targets separately for each type of batteries. Okay, they have considered them separately. That's another feature of this. Okay. And they talk about environmental compensation also, which comes from the polluter-based principle. And if one look at the numbers, there are about 42 different compliances obligations which are mentioned in the rules. Of course, these 42 covers the entire compliance, but all the 42 is not applicable to everyone. If there are different compliances for the producer, for refurbishers, for recyclers, so on. But the total number is 42 distributed among them. Okay. With this, let's go to the next major important topic of environmental compensation. Um, as I said, this is based on the polluter-based principle. Okay. So in this slide, we will discuss the different nuances of it. And just to repeat, this environmental compensation was originally a judicial decision. But this battery waste management rules and earlier the e-waste management rules also, they have given the power to the authority, the Pollution Control Board, the authority to levy, to impose this environmental compensation. And for what? For non-fulfillment or false EPR and violations of the provision. Okay. However, they have made it practical and to incentivize. There is a conditional and partial refund of the EC. amount. Okay. So, but of course, this is not for extended only for 3 years. So basically, you have some leeway for 3 years. So if you are um, fulfilling your the difference or whatever EPR in the first year itself, 75% of the amount will be refunded. If you are fulfilling in the second year, it is 60%, and the third year it is 40%. This is for battery waste. In e-waste, some other percentages are there. And beyond 3 years, you have to forfeit the environmental compensation, which will go into an environmental compensation fund, and it will be used for by the government. Okay, and to whom all they can levy this? Pretty much, it will be levied on unregistered producer, manufacturer, refurbisher, recyclers, or any entity which aids in a violation of these rules. Okay. The EC can be levied, may be levied by the authority. Okay, that's the next. There is a confusion or a general notion that, oh, I have paid the compensation and will I get free from the non-compliance? The answer is a big no. In fact, this is expressly provided in the rule. It's not an interpretation. It is not an explanation. It is not a comprehension or understanding or inference, but it is provided expressly in the rule itself that just by paying the EC, it does not absolve anybody from EPR. Okay. Principally, the producer, the penal consequence, other legal consequence would still be attracted. Okay. This is in addition to that. Okay, this is in addition, not as a excuse. No, it's in addition to it. And this is levied by the authority, not the ones by the courts. Okay. In fact, if there are litigation, that could also attract. Okay. The CPCB, the Central Pollution Control Board, has prepared a detailed guidelines on the EC. In the e-resource, I will point out that how they are calculated and things like that. But for this webinar, we'll just see the highlights. It is split into two regimes, EC regime 1 and EC regime 2. The EC regime 1 is in respect of EPR, either non-fulfillment of EPR or false EPR, extended producer responsibility. And regime 2 is for any other non-compliance of other provisions other than EPR. So two regimes. And in regime 1 is further split into two sections. One for lead acid batteries and the other one is for lithium ion and other batteries. Okay, split into two. EC1 has two sections. One specifically for lead acid, and the second section is for lithium ion and other batteries. The reason is the process of recycling and extraction of materials is widely different for this. Lead acid it's a different beast. That's why they have found it different. And the computation, those calculations are detailed in the guidelines. What I would like to highlight is for the EC, it is based on the difference in the EPR target, and more importantly, it is a amount derived, some weighted average, some factors are there, but the cost needed for recycling, extracting, and it includes the first steps like collection, transportation, storage. Those costs, they are all added, and some factor is there for different use cases, and that is what is imposed as environmental compensation. Okay. So now it is clear why there is a refund incentive, because this is the cost you have to bear for different stages, right? And if you are doing it, then you get it back. Of course, it's partial and no, conditional. This is regime one. And for not for other the regime two, this basically the money, the amount levied depends on the particular non-compliance. For example, if you are not registering, if you are not renewed, so there is a registration fee, there is a renewal fee. So those amounts are the base for the regime two. So finally, so this is the current statistics of recyclers. Okay. And actually, this number is from last week. Today morning, I saw that the total registered recyclers have become 560 or 554. Okay. So this is pan-India statistics. We see that the top 10 states which are listed here accounts for pretty much 87% of the total registered recyclers. And this number is expected to grow. And there are still about 10 states, some in the northeastern part of the country, and even Odisha, I think. They don't have even one recyclers. Okay. So people, organizations from those places, they have to pay extra attention to find out the ones closer in the neighboring states. Okay, but these numbers are pretty decent numbers in the sense. If you look at the number of producers, if my memory is correct, it's like 4,800 or something producers. So even if you take 5,000 as a round figure, so we are more than 10%. So this is a pretty decent, but I think this is not enough. More players are going to come, especially because I said about the 10-year life cycle. This I would emphasize that this particular statement is the key takeaway. There is a 10-year window period given for all combinations. The window period is 10 years. After in the 10 years, we should have recycled 100%, because the components, materials are, detrimental to the environment. That is the notion. So we have 10 years. So the rule came in 2022, right? Then there are targets given for each year. So we have completed, for 5 years or something. This won't hit us hard now, but make sure that in the next few years, if you are not meeting your EPR targets, make sure that you have enough schemes, like the buyback scheme, or you incentivize the consumers to, give you back, or you can have various schemes for collecting the batteries, okay, used batteries, waste batteries, so that you reach your targets at the end of this 10 years cycle. So now maybe it's not that urgent because we are only in the midpoint, but definitely in the coming years, since the production is going to increase, the batteries which are going to be introduced in the market is going to increase. Basically, the used waste battery will increase. So it's better, it's prudent, and I would strongly urge everyone to think about the schemes and plans you would like to implement with your entire product life cycle management, EPR target management, so that you cover the 100% target in the 10-year cycle. So we have 10 years, cycle prescribed by them. Okay. And finally, these are the e-resources I would like to share with you. There are two important websites, EPR battery. There is a central government pollution control board. It is a central portal. And then there is this EPR electronic trading platform where you can trade, the EPR. Okay. And these are some of the nice materials like FAQs, the EC guideline, which I had highlighted earlier, and even on EPR generation. And there are some SOPs I have highlighted, only two I have showed here. The SOP for producer and SOP, standard operating procedure for recyclers. All these are freely available in the EPR battery CPCB website. Okay. I would like urge each one of you to download, and there are pretty useful information and practical informations are there for your different use cases. Okay. With this, I would like to thank you again for attending and thank you for your participation. If you have any questions, we will try to address them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, if anyone is having their questions, kindly put in the chat box so that we can address it.
Any questions coming up, Shreya?
No, sir. This first one, could you
Okay. Yeah.
please provide details of the returns that are applicable and registered to be maintained?
So by whom? See, as far as the registers and returns are concerned, so there are three main players, okay? Producers, recyclers, refurbishers. So all the three players, there are some returns and registers to be maintained, which are prescribed under the Act. Okay, and so typically there are two types in the periodic from the point of view of periodicity. One is for annual returns, and the other one is, I think there is an half-yearly return also. So this corresponds to basically conceptually the EPR types and the batteries which are introduced in the market, and those types of things are the ones which are basically the returns which are prescribed. Okay.
Okay. The second question is lithium battery waste disposal is falling under the same battery waste rules?
Yes, yes, definitely, definitely. In fact, the EC environmental compensation regime 2 is specifically uses the word lithium ion and other batteries. And lithium ion is going to be the next biggest challenge because all our EV and all those things, electric vehicle and all our cell phones, everything is lithium ion. So that's a big challenge. Yeah.
Okay. Next question. What's the responsibility for bulk consumer? Is EPR registration required for consumers?
No, a clear no. No, consumer need not register anything. Like I said during the webinar, because even individual, domestic we use and the consumer, it's a pain, especially country like India with a huge population and diverse, diversity in every parameter you can think of. So actually, so even for institutional consumers, the answer is a no. No,
Okay.
no returns, no registration, nothing. Only thing which is imposed is you have to, segregate and, dispose to the, um, or give away the waste to the registered players. That's the only thing.
Okay. The next question. We are buying battery and assembly in EV. Are we needed to file any returns?
Yes, yep, yep. Because, like I said, the batteries which are part of an equipment is also covered. Okay. So you buy batteries. So but you are not the end consumer. You fit it into another equipment, which is the vehicle, and then you sell that vehicle, right? So you are also have to register and you have to file returns because the logic is very simple, In the process of buying and fitting into your e-vehicle, there will be other things involved, like there will be damages, there will be storage of battery, transportation of battery, then you are handing it to the final customer. So all these processes, sub-processes, and intermediates, they may involve, environmental impact. That is the logic why you are also mandated to register. Yeah.
Okay. The last question. What about imports of batteries for bulk consumer?
I don't know what you mean by bulk consumer in the context of battery waste. See, the bulk consumer concept is not there in the battery waste. Okay, it's the consumer only. Consumer is the end user of the battery. That is the definition. We have to use that definition. So it doesn't matter whether you consume 100 batteries or 200 batteries or whatever it is, doesn't matter. Okay, number one. Number two is there is a notion of bulk consumer in e-waste and all. So that is a different, totally a different ball game. So that is different. Okay. So it has no, if you are a consumer per se, then apart from these two, nothing comes. But here you are mentioning about the import of batteries, right? When you talk about import of batteries, that puts another extra different dimension to the whole issue. So when you import batteries, then the import restrictions, those things will come indirectly. And as I mentioned earlier, that this is battery waste is an exception to the general framework, and it has touch point with hazardous waste management transboundary rules. Since batteries contain hazardous material most often than not. Lithium is an hazardous material. Lead is an hazardous material. Okay. In fact, there are studies to show that even lithium could uh, cause cancer. Okay. And lithium has a very high lifetime. Okay. Anyways, so those restrictions will indirectly come into play. Okay. So those things will come into play definitely when you're importing.
Okay. Two more questions. One is
Okay.
DG and UPS batteries must be disposed of through authorized recycler or buyback is allowed.
See, answer is yes. And as far as the buyback is concerned, that's a scheme. And towards the end, I mentioned about various scheme. The rule expressly provides for some scheme, and it encourages this concept of buyback. Okay, it has. provides two benefits. Number one is the recycle target can be fixed, the EPR targets can be fixed, you know. So that takes care of it. And the second one is the producer or the seller or the recycler, they know the what is the movement of these batteries, you know, when you have a buyback scheme. Okay. In fact, buyback scheme, if you ask me personally, I would say that is the greatest and most efficient scheme for recycling, refurbishing, and for meeting the EPR targets. So that's what I would say. In fact, you can have staggered buyback also, you know, like from the producer to the dealer to the sub dealer to the final retailer, you know, can do that. In fact, if I remember correctly, there are countries that I have, it's been a few years, even departmental stores, they have these schemes, you know, you can have a kiosk for depositing your batteries, you know, the double A's and triple A's, and they give, you know, few cents or something like that, just to incentivize. There are schemes like that. And this um, rule is framed in such a way that it will encourage those schemes. Okay. Maybe we can take two more questions if there are.
Yeah, there's just one more. So in
Okay.
residential apartment, the used USB battery waste is getting generated in considerable quantity. Is there any guideline for apartments? Also vehicular batteries in apartments.
Yeah, actually, for these use cases, you have correctly pointed out that that's a big challenge. There is no specific guidelines, you know, nothing specific there, except that, like we discussed about the schemes, um, there is none provided. Only the compliance obligation is provided. We have to be careful in disposing these batteries and these waste, and the hazardous waste management rules will also apply. Okay, so the risk and the compliance burden, the legal penal consequences would follow, um, but there is no direct guidelines to the best of my knowledge which they have given. And I think it should be domestically, and the civil society should handle it in a responsible way. Okay.
Okay. So thank you, sir. And thank you
Thank
everyone, audience, for such a patient hearing. And thank you, sir, for taking us in depth about the battery waste and even about the definition, which got many things cleared.
Thank you. Thank you, Shreya. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all for your questions and interaction. See you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you.